Welcome to this podcast is making me thirsty, the number one destination for Seinfeld fans. Today's guest is an NFT artist, an author, an actor. As an actor, you know him from Robocop, Friday Night Lights, The Sun, Dallas, and of course, as NBC executive Stu Chermack in 5 Seinfeld episodes. Please welcome Kevin Page. Kevin, thanks for joining.
Hey, thanks for having me.
All right.
Kevin, thanks for joining this podcast. It's making me thirsty. So take us back, 1992, right?
Hang on, I'm thirsty.
I know. You just finished filming one of my favorite shows, Hunter, in 1991 with Babu, who you reunite with in the finale. But fast forward a little bit to September of '92. That's when the pitch aired. Give us a little insight into the whole process with Seinfeld. Was there an audition? I know you played Rick Ludwin. I'd love to hear how involved he was kind of in casting. Let us know.
Hang on. Here, you can pause this, right? I'll show you in a second. In 1992, the casting director for Seinfeld actually called me a couple of times. I had met him right after I'd done RoboCop when I was living in Dallas, and so he'd been very kind to me for a long time and saw me for a number of things. So they'd actually brought me into Seinfeld maybe 2 or 3 times. I don't really recall. It was earlier, and this one came up, and I went in and I ended up reading for Jerry and can't remember who was there, but anyway, the point is, I got hired to do this part. And I really thought that was my magnificent acting talent. I mean, I just nailed that so hard that these guys gave me that role. I mean, really, I trained at SMU. I had half a master's degree, and the brilliance of my talent in my own mind at the time was absolutely awesome. So we do the show, and we shoot for the season, basically. It was season 4.
Yep.
You guys know better than me. And we get to the wrap party where everybody's hanging out, and Larry David's there, and we're having drinks and laughs, and some guy walks up to me with my very same glasses, and he looks something like that. And I realized that it had nothing to do with my talent. I happen to bear a very strong physical resemblance to Rick Ludwin, who was a very kind and pretty funny guy himself. So that's how talented I am to get on Seinfeld story.
Well, he sat behind you in the pilot episode, if I recall.
Yeah, I think he did. That's right. Yeah.
With Warren Littlefield.
Yeah.
So tell us a little bit. So you tried out a bunch of times before, and then this role of Stu came about. Obviously, it was for the whole season, but
that wasn't obvious at all.
You try out for
that was not obvious at all. It was just a one-off gig, as far as I know.
All right.
They often don't inform the actress what they do, so they give you your lines, and it's a sitcom, so we rehearsed for a week, and I got to hang out with the cast, and they're really cool. And and then it's like, oh, your agent calls, and they want you back next week, and oh, by the way, we're going to check your availability. So it was kind of a work in progress the whole time, at least from my perspective.
Oh, interesting. So in the first episode you're on is actually a 1 hour kind of 2-part episode, the pitch to ticket. Was that shot all at once as a full 1 hour show? Do you remember? I mean, I'm just curious because it's one of those where it's like it's an hour episode that's kind of broken up between the actual pitch and then they go in the whole.
Honestly, I don't actually remember because from the actor's perspective, who are sort of the last to know, that was 2 separate episodes from our perspective. So I don't actually recall if we filmed them in the same cycle or if it was 1 week, one week and one the next. But as far as I know, I had shot 2 episodes, but then they did air them as a special, I guess.
Right. And so one of the most legendary scenes in the show. I mean, we rank the pitch to the ticket. We rank it 22nd O'Hara, I think, somewhere in the top 25. Yeah, it's unbelievable. The whole
it's like 6 degrees of Kevin Bacon. Does that get me closer to Kevin Bacon? I have Robert De Niro, so I'm only a 1 away. But this may be better.
How much fun was shooting that whole that whole sequence there, with George, artistic integrity. We're not going to, this is the show. Anything you tell us about shooting that scene, maybe behind the scenes stuff, anything that kind of came up that you recall about that?
Absolutely. So at the time I was working on the show had really, I think, sort of took off round about that season. So, in fact, when I was doing the show, nobody was the super most famous comedians in the whole world kind of thing,
Mm,
right? And so my response to it was, these guys are really good actors, meaning they're just very funny and very loose. And Michael Richards, I remember, was very very disciplined on the set. He has all these crazy uh, pratfalls that he does, and the way he does that, which they look very spontaneous, is he rehearses
right.
a lot. So you'd be sitting here talking to George and Sherry, and they'd be working on the script, and over in the darkened part of the set in the Kramer set, Kramer be coming through the door 70 times trying to figure out the exact right way to fall down. So my interpretation of it was, and I'd done several sitcoms before, not to cast any aspersions, but I mean
Right.
these guys are really good actors and very very funny, and they worked in a real uh, creative process. There was no doubt. I mean, sometimes people just learn their lines and they say their lines and they say them like they think they should. And these guys, they were completely off the hook by this point in the fourth season. They were making shit up right and left, and you just had to play sort of like basketball. Somebody throws you the ball, you catch it.
Right. Right.
It's funny you mentioned that. Those first two episodes they aired on Wednesday night, so you're right. The show was kind of just taking off, and then by the time the version of the pilot came, that's when it moved behind Cheers and kind of doubled in audience, if you will.
Yeah.
So you mentioned some of the chemistry, and I think it's weird doing this interview without Jay Crespi, right? I mean, he was your right hand man.
Peter Blood, yeah,
Peter
sure.
Blood, yeah. So him, and Susan kind of had a good chemistry with your
Mhm.
bosses throughout. Can you touch on any stories from those two?
Well, it's actor stuff, man. You just sit
Yeah.
around try to crack each other up. That's really the job. Is you get paid to try to make the other people on the set laugh, and then you got to kind of calm the humor down when they turn the cameras on. Then you get back to futzing around. And they were funny. Peter, I think, was a Chicago actor, maybe. I don't
Mm,
remember exactly. And of course, uh, Heidi.
yeah.
Heidi, yeah.
Heidi went on to many other great things as well, and she was terrific. And the stories that I recall that were told behind the scenes absolutely are not appropriate for a public podcast. So it was a lot of fun.
So you mentioned that you didn't know that you were coming back, for 4 episodes when you got the part. I'm assuming the same is true then when you got the call for the finale. Now you were a part of the finale, which is obviously one of the most watched shows in the history
Right.
of television, and we're kind of big fans of the finale. Some Seinfeld fans, it's mixed reviews,
Some
but we
aren't,
love
yeah,
it.
some are.
Yeah, we love it. What can you tell us about shooting the finale? I'm sure that was a pretty cool experience, being there with everyone coming back and all that kind of stuff and the secrecy behind it and everything.
Right. It was wildly different from the first season for me personally, because by the time the finale came up, which was 5 years ish since we had shot the first season that I was in,
Mhm.
I had essentially left Hollywood, moved back to Texas. I had gotten a Series 7 and had become a stockbroker.
Oh, wow.
And I think I'd probably put on about 20 pounds too. And so somehow they tracked me down and they figured out where I was, because I still had relationships with my agents in Dallas, but it wasn't working other than hawking, trying to sell IBM or some such thing. And so we got this call, and I just started this job at this big Wall Street firm. And hair was cut, and I was wearing suits every day because that was just the thing you did back then. And I got this call, said, "Hey, they want to bring you back for the finale of the show." And now the truth was known. Seinfeld's the biggest sitcom in the entire freaking world,
Right.
and it was like a phenomenon. It was very weird trying to get onto the sounds, the studio locked. You had people hanging out with signs. It was crazy. So I had to go and ask my boss. He was a fairly new boss. I said, "Look, because you have to, when you're a stockbroker, you're supervised, and they have to know what you're doing so that you're not doing anything to violate securities laws. And I said, look, can I get a couple of days off and go shoot this TV show I was on? And I don't think he knew what it was. He was a
Right.
pretty conservative guy, and I'm like, I think it might be good for my stock business. People see me on TV. So I talked him into it, but he almost said no.
Oh,
Uh,
wow.
and I'm glad that he didn't because yeah, it was pretty cool.
So they had no they had no idea that that was your previous, life when you got the stockbroker job. Like, they had no idea that that was your previous life, an actor?
Oh, I'm sure I promoted the hell out of it. Yeah, I
Right, right,
probably
okay,
talked him into giving me the job because I was a little famous,
yeah. Right, right.
but anyway, that's probably not of any interest to anybody. You get me
No, no,
talking, and
very
I go boring
interesting.
really fast.
No, 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 I love it. I mean, this is your it looks like, just from, the artwork behind you, I know you're an NFT artist
Mhm.
now. It sounds like you kinda just wherever it takes you, that's where you're going at the time, you know? Curious when did you get into NFTs? When did it start? I mean, I heard about him almost 2 years ago from my buddy
Right.
who's actually an NFT artist now, and he was telling me about this 2 years ago, and hardly anyone had ever heard of it at that point. Now it's sort of a bit of a boom going on, but I'm just curious how you got into that field.
Well, actually, it's a long and sordid tale. I'll try to make it short. I was about 10 years ago. I was starring on a TV series called Dallas, which was a reboot of an American television series from way, way, way back. And they did something unique with this particular show. They actually brought back the original cast members, so Larry Hagman and Linda Gray and all these fabulous nighttime soap actors from the '70s were there. And I ended up being the guy who killed J.R. Ewing. So that's like a Jeopardy question for reals. I've
Who
seen the
shot
clip.
Jr.? Yeah.
I killed Jr. And at the time, I had a small art gallery, and so the two were kind of combined. And the story is, I got involved with a scientist whose day job was to place molecules in very specific locations on a silicone wafer using what was called nanotechnology.
Got it.
And he somehow got interested in artists and a form of art called pointillism, which is the application of really tiny little dots of color, like thousands of them. A French guy in the 1800s came up with this and did this by hand, and it almost killed him because it's physically so challenging. So I worked with this guy, and we got 4 patents on a giant robot that actually places dots of oil paint just like a pointillist painter, and effectively it's an electronic paintbrush. And so that painting behind me has 335,000 individual strokes of hand mixed oil paint, all placed very carefully by my robotic system.
Wow.
And so if you didn't see the robot video, it may not even be out there anymore. Anyway, the point is, I had been sort of in the traditional art world as one of the world's only living pointillists at the time, because believe me, if you try to do that by hand,
Yeah.
you'll still be doing that 10 years from now.
Are you programming the robot to make the dots?
What's
Or
that?
are you programming the robot
Oh,
to make the dots where you
well, there's a
want
whole
them?
system that we hold the patents on about how we
Okay.
get the color data essentially into our proprietary software platform. Now, this really is getting boring.
Got it.
The
No,
point
I
is,
got it. Yeah, my
I had an art
I'm
gallery.
interested, but
Yeah,
okay,
it's
go
cool.
ahead.
You can look at it some other time. But yeah, I had an art gallery as a pointillist oil painter, and these really big, giant paintings and stuff. And so in about 2016, I closed that business. I started doing some writing. I finished a master's degree in psychology, kind of left the art world behind. I was doing really well as an actor. Not too long ago, I had agents in Atlanta and I had agents in Texas, and I was doing 2 or 3 auditions a week. And then this little thing called a pandemic came along
Yeah.
and kind of shut that shit down cold. And as a matter of fact, it's just starting to come back now, at least in the markets I work in. And so as a result, I essentially lost my job as a result of the pandemic, and I kind of got back interested in art. And so at the time that I found out about NFTs, which was basically around Christmas of last year, so I'm an old timer. I've been in the deal for maybe 8 months. Uh, I sort of, that sort of affected my interest in the combination of technology and art,
Got
which
it.
is exactly what the robotics thing was about. But it was it was online. So I very quickly tripped to the idea of what NFTs were about. And I think I did the smart thing, which was then I lurked for about 5 months
Mm.
and I worked on my skills and I listened and I looked at thousands of pieces of art every day till I kind of felt like I had an understanding of what the space was about. And I'm super lucky, I guess just because I've been an artist in one form or another my whole life. But in this particular space, the vibe is not your traditional oil painting vibe. It's a
Right,
vibe that's
right.
very influenced by video games and comic books and kind of a wry postmodern sense of humor. And the thing is, I've been playing video games since Pong in an unbroken streak for 40 years. So I get it. I mean, I get the vibe, man. So I'm very excited about it. I have 2 auctions going right now on various platforms, and I'm on the Rareable platform. I'm on
Yep.
Foundation, and I really hope to be on Super Rare pretty soon. And I'm selling this crazy art. And if I can get enough followers, I have some ideas for some kind of strange, maybe
Yeah.
There we
something
go.
to do with RoboCop. Uh,
Well,
like I thought
and
about, and this is just a thought experiment, but I thought about they put out that's actually a very. Let me show you this a little better. This is actually a very collectible
Yeah,
Mr.
yeah.
Kenny versus Ed 209 collectible set. As you can see right there, there I am.
Huh.
And there's only a few hundred of these made. And so I had thought about having a Mr. Kenny's Revenge NFT where I get like a hammer and some lighter fluid, maybe a shotgun, take out an Ed 209 so that Mr. Kenny has his day, and do that as an NFT. But
I dig it.
I got to sell some more art first. So
yeah.
anyway, that's the whole
Awesome, man.
NFT thing.
Well, a
Very cool.
common theme you just brought up. I mean, George, buys a lot of art within Seinfeld to bring us back to the so take us back. I mean, you were in 5 episodes. I know the pilot was pretty special. It kind of brought you back into the fold. What of the episodes were your favorite? The pitch, the ticket, the virgin, the pilot, or the finale? Which did you have the most fun on?
Well, to me, it was all fun because when you're an actor living in Hollywood, believe me, work is the fun part. Honestly, I guess I can't be fired off a show that quit shooting 30 years ago. So I'll tell you the truth. And
Yeah.
this is not unusual for actors. I hadn't watched the show much.
Uh-huh.
I was an actor in Hollywood. I didn't have time to sit down and watch sitcoms at 8 o'clock at night. I was either in acting classes or out auditioning or working out or training or performing, doing something. And so it was not until 10 years ago that we got the box set of the DVDs and started on episode 1. And that's a pretty funny show. It's actually very funny, still holds up. And so we're rewatching it now with my teenage daughter. She's about ready to go off to college, film school at USC. And so we're
nice.
going through the Seinfeld series as a sort of part of classic television history. Anyway, so to not really answer your question, I have so many, and most of them were not ones I was in because it was just so damn funny.
Yeah, well, see, an episode we love is the pilot, and I think it's unique. The audition scene, you were fantastic in that.
Yeah,
Larry
incredible.
Hankin, Jeremy Piven,
Ah,
Mariska Hargitay was the only one who portrayed Elaine. I'm curious, were there any? Did they shoot any more of those that we missed that they didn't show, as far as people trying out or anything silly that happened on set?
yeah, so you obviously, since you talk to people about this all the time, you know how they shoot a 3-camera sitcom,
Mhm.
which is basically like a play in 3 acts. And so each act they had 3 cameras going at once, and they'll intercut between that, usually live, but they can fix it in post if it's not broadcast live, and it never is. So frankly, as I recall, and I mean, didn't know the editors, so I don't know directly, but as I recall, they had more material than they could use, and there was some pain on the editing floor for some actors, I guess. So I don't know, probably. I mean, but listen, those by that point, those were those were some of the best comic actors in Hollywood. They were able to attract to that.
Right.
So yeah, I'm sure they had a lot of gold they left behind. Sad but true. Maybe it'll come out as an NFT someday.
I believe that scene starts with the you're sort of finishing a story about the parakeet and the mirror. Does this ring a bell for you? Do you know, was that in the script, just like those 3 words, where they just let you kind of have this, like, just kind of part of a story? Were you telling more of a story? Do you remember that? You're just like,
Oh, that was definitely scripted.
yeah, just like those 3
Yeah,
words,
when
just
you're a
like,
visiting actor on somebody
yeah,
else's show, you got to be a little. And by the way, the star of the show writes the show. You want to be.
right, right,
You may bring in an idea, but you're careful about which ones you really try to, ask for. So it's better if you can figure out how to make it funny the way they saw it. I think.
right, right.
Although I'm infamous for improving myself as well. And by the way, they were open to that.
Yeah.
If you said something funny, there was no, they didn't have any ego about this shit. They wanted to make a good show, and I think they did.
Right. And you, so that's a good question. So you're, we understand, you're playing the NBC executive. Just the initial, when you go up to Jerry in the comedy club, then when you're in the meetings, you have this sort of like executive suit personality that you hear about when you hear, especially someone like Jerry talking in interviews about talking to the suits, is like they're laughing at things that probably aren't funny. They don't really get the joke, like you had that down to a T. I mean, was that just from being in those rooms? Or I mean, where was that like inspiration for that sort of like, you know, straight edge, like exec trying to be hip with the comedian in the room kind of thing, It's really, you really nailed it.
Well, this is another little dirty secret from my past. You guys are going to get me in all kinds of trouble. Prior to moving to Hollywood, I started my career as an actor in Texas. And that was where I shot Robocop. That was sort of where I got that break. And the way non-famous actors make a living usually is to do what are either called industrial films or commercials. And so, and I was a pretty average looking guy. I was never a great beauty, but I did look a lot like the kid right down the street, kind of that, everybody's brother or something. Right. And you can tell, right? And so I had done a shit ton of commercial work and literally what's called industrial spokesman, where I would put on a suit and tie and I'd be reading a teleprompter. And I might say something like, when you have a new insurance policy with GPM, then you're going to find that you have great coverage. Now, walk this way and we'll explain this to you. So I had done this spokesman-y, weird ass corporate shit like my whole acting life. And it was a big secret. You don't tell people in Hollywood that you did that because they'll go, oh, right. And so I think that probably I had some practice with the suits because I'd had some practice with the suits.
So speaking of the suits, like I know you were based on Rick Ludwin. We talked about him, and you had the picture at the party. Was that the first time you met him at the post party, or was he involved?
No, I think it was.
Yeah.
Now he may have been in. I don't think he was in casting, because he was just, I think I met him at the wrap party for the end of season 4, and this dude comes walking up to me. He's kind of grinning. And he said something to the effect of, do you know who I am or something? And so that was when I had this horrifying moment of realizing that I just looked like the guy.
Right. And we should tell
the
audience.
I thought I was so talented.
We should tell the audience who he is too. I mean, most of our fans should know, but
he
was the guy really behind making Seinfeld stay on the air. I mean, he was the exec.
Well, he was actually the guy that brought the David Letterman show on TV. And so he was a late night executive.
Yeah.
And he didn't really have, as far as I know, he didn't have much business fooling around with the primetime sitcom arena, but he met Jerry, and that part of the story, that part of the tale apparently is fairly historically, correct. Yeah. He approached him at a comedy club and said, hey man, do you want to do a show?
And the
really nice guy, by the way.
Hell guy. Stu, who you played, had 3 bosses, right? You had Russell Dalrymple, you had Rita Kierson, who was tough as nails, and then you came back with James Kimbrough. So a nice little run. You and Jay Crespi had a good run there with 3 different bosses.
Well, that we actually were cross-cloned at some point in like season 7 or 8, maybe 6. I beat you.
Wait, what do you mean cross-cloned?
So apparently, while I was off being a stockbroker,
Oh,
They
man.
aired an episode where they very briefly, it may have only been a phone call or some guy just came in and
Oh,
they said, "Hi, this is
Oh,
Jay Crespi and
yes.
Stu."
Yes, yes,
yeah.
yes, yes, yes.
And so that was
Voice,
when they
yes.
couldn't find my agent.
But I mean,
Uh,
Kevin, some of the lines you had, I don't know if you remember all of them, but I mean, everything from, can we see the script of La Cucina? Like just from the fall lineup, it's a bear. Like, what did you? I mean, you played an executive so well. It's funny. That's why I keep asking if Rick Ludwin was involved. But it sounds like clearly you're a great actor. But I mean, how
Oh,
involved? I mean,
obviously.
obviously, but like Larry and Tom Sharonis, like how hands on were these guys during the shooting? Do you remember?
Well, I think Tom directed every damn episode of the series.
except 2 in the first 5 seasons,
Yeah,
yeah.
so he was about as hands on as you can get. He was the director.
Right.
Uh, Honestly, I think that, well, you again would know the history better than myself. I know that Larry had left the show somewhere around there, and I don't remember whether he was even on the
He
show that
left.
whole. Did he
He
leave
left.
before the fourth season?
No,
Did he
No,
came
Larry
back?
left after
7.
8. This was after
After
7,
7,
so
yeah.
Oh,
8,
okay.
9 came back for the
So he
finale.
came back to do the final episode.
Yeah.
That's the one part I remember. What are you asking old actors shit for 35 years?
And like, when Michael Richards comes in, you say, "Oh, I remember you from the Calvin Klein ads." I mean, you had a pretty strong presence on the show. But
Thank you.
you mentioned you were kind of they told you later. So all these were filmed in order. So you didn't film the last 2 until,
No,
the
it
next.
was for it was there was this I believe it was this probably a 7-day schedule, maybe 5. I can't remember what the 5 to 7 shooting days for each half an hour sequence, and then you'd rehearse it on and then get it up on its feet and do it on the set, and then you'd have an audience come in and you'd shoot it, and usually do it twice. Normally, I think
Are you
each take.
getting more what do you say you get more recognized for, Seinfeld or RoboCop? I mean, RoboCop has a huge sort of cult following as well, but it's a little bit further back, I guess. I guess with Seinfeld on reruns and things. I mean, you don't look like Stu Chermack so much anymore, maybe, but I'm sure you still get it, right? Oh, we put the glasses on.
Really?
Yeah, there we go. Perfect. There it is.
Uh,
Exactly.
Honestly, I think I'm more famous for RoboCop.
Yeah.
I don't know why. I mean, the fans on Seinfeld, there's actually more of them, and they do know who I am if I tell them. But the people from what's so weird about RoboCop was, may I tell a RoboCop story?
Yeah, yeah. By
Yeah.
all means.
Um, so Paul Verhoeven was this Dutch director, and he had a real artistic sensibility, and so his vision for RoboCop was to really use that to make some serious social commentary from his perspective. And one of the things he was really taking an aim at was corporate excess and greed and all of these things that were themes at that time. And also the violence in movies.
Mm.
So his intention was to take the violence, particularly like in the little scene where they blow up Mr. Kinney at the beginning, and exaggerate it to the point of the absurd. So it essentially becomes comedy as a way to bring people's attention to how ridiculous I think he felt that the violence in movies was at that time.
Mm.
And ironically, he did such a damn good job of it that the film itself was rated X 24 times at the rating board until finally he cut out 3 seconds of Peter Weller's death and 3 seconds of mine. And
Oh,
that's
wow.
what got it an R rating. And it became like the film that opened so many young filmmakers' eyes to really violent movies. So weirdly enough, he was making this social commentary, but he did it so well, it almost sort of increased it or became because the violence was intentionally absurd.
Right.
Uh, but it played so well that people. So my point is, I think I may be more famous for RoboCop because so many generations of filmmakers would see this flippin' movie when they were 8, 9, 10, 11, 12 years old, completely inappropriate. It's a
Right.
hard R, but everybody watched it. And so now all of these filmmakers that grew up and saw this film at 8 or 9 years old, they remember me.
It's iconic. Yeah.
That's it.
So, Kevin, we'll wrap with this. What can you tell us about the season 4 wrap party? Any good stories? Who'd you bump into? What can you tell us?
I was actually going to do a little thing, but I got behind and I wasn't able to look it up. The wrap party for season 4. Have you anybody else told this story yet?
No,
No,
heard a
we
lot
had
of
Larry
oh,
Hankin on, but he didn't tell us. I don't think we got anything out of him about the rap
It was a
party.
bowling party.
Oh, interesting.
Jerry rented out an entire bowling alley somewhere over in the valley and took the whole thing, cast and crew, everything. Free booze, free food, fabulous. And we bowled. And in our little gift bags, there was a bottle of Eternity for Men cologne. It was a cologne that was very popular at the time, real kind of fruity thing. And I still, to this day, because I don't really wear cologne. So I just sort of kept it. And then as the legend of the thing grew over decades, I sort of like, wow, this is my collectible from the season 4 bowling wrap party for Seinfeld.
You got to make it into an NFT. It's like that's a collectible right there.
Yeah, again, I got to get a little more famous for the art piece, but I have my eye on you. I'm thinking maybe an NFT about nothing.
And the Eternity's a Calvin Klein. Is that a Calvin Klein fragrance? Bringing it back to Kramer, the Calvin Klein model. Sounds like it is.
I have no idea. I don't think
I don't
so.
wear
I
it
think
either.
it was more of a lower end, just sort of like Walmart thing, but I don't really recall. Well, hey, thanks so much for letting
Thank
me
you, Kevin.
tell me stories and stuff. I appreciate it.
No, this was awesome, man.
Thanks, Kevin.
Where is your NFT art again? Rarible? Is it on OpenSea?
Mostly it's on Foundation.
Oh, Foundation. Okay, cool.
And then there's a couple of other sort of larger platforms that that I'm talking to, but we haven't settled it yet.
Got it. Anything in the acting world? You dipping your toes back in there now that the pandemic's off, or no?
I literally have an audition for a series in about 2 hours.
Okay, cool.
Yeah, and so like the first one in almost 2 years.
Oh, wow.
I get some voice auditions because they kind of still do, and it's starting to pick up. But
cool.
But I'm really, man, I'm serious. I'm doing this art full time, and I'm really having a good time.
That's awesome.
These younger collectors and artists are so generous. It's very different from being an actor in Hollywood in the '90s. People are nice. It's weird.
Well, best
All
of
right,
luck.
guys. Thank you very much.
Thank you so much, Kevin. Awesome.
Cool.
Thank you, Kevin.
Thank you.
All right, later.